For much of early Christianity, the church existed on the margins of political power. Its leaders preached humility, spiritual devotion, and obedience to God rather than to earthly rulers. Yet over the course of the Middle Ages, the papacy transformed from a religious office into one of the most powerful political institutions in Europe. This transformation was neither sudden nor inevitable. It was shaped by centuries of instability, ambition, conflict, and strategic adaptation to a changing world. After the collapse of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century, Europe entered a period of political fragmentation. Central authority disappeared, cities declined, and regional rulers competed for control over land and resources. In this chaotic environment, the church remained one of the few institutions that preserved continuity. Bishops maintained local order, monasteries safeguarded literacy, and religious networks connected distant regions through shared beliefs and rituals. Rome itself, once the capital of an empire, became a symbolic center rather than a political one. The Bishop of Rome, later known as the Pope, initially held no formal authority over other bishops. Early Christian leadership was decentralized, with major cities such as Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem exercising significant influence. The primacy of the Roman bishop developed gradually, grounded more in tradition than in law. A crucial factor in Rome's growing authority was the belief that the Apostle Peter, regarded as the leader of Christ's disciples, had been martyred in Rome. Over time, the Roman bishop claimed to be Peter's direct successor. This claim, known as apostolic succession, became the theological foundation for papal authority. By presenting himself as the heir to Peter's spiritual leadership, the Pope asserted a unique position within the Christian world. During the early Middle Ages, the Church increasingly filled the vacuum left by declining imperial power in the West. As secular rulers struggled to maintain order, bishops and abbots took on administrative roles. They managed lands, collected taxes, mediated disputes, and even organized defense. The boundaries between spiritual and temporal authority blurred, setting the stage for the Church's political rise. One of the most influential figures in this transformation was Pope Gregory I, later known as Gregory the Great, who ruled from 590 to 604. Gregory strengthened papal administration, expanded missionary efforts, and asserted Rome's moral authority over both clergy and rulers. He emphasized the Pope's role as the servant of the servants of God, yet his actions significantly increased papal influence across Europe. As the Frankish kingdoms rose to power, the papacy formed strategic alliances with secular rulers. These alliances proved mutually beneficial. Kings gained religious legitimacy, while the Church received protection and political support. This relationship reached a turning point in the 8th century when the papacy aligned itself with the Carolingian dynasty. The Lombards, a Germanic people who had settled in Italy, posed a direct threat to Rome. Lacking military strength, the Pope turned to the Frankish king Pepin the Short for assistance. In return for military support, the Pope crowned Pepin as king, legitimizing his rule. After defeating the Lombards, Pepin donated conquered lands to the papacy. This donation created the Papal States, granting the Pope direct territorial control for the first time. With land came power. The papacy was no longer solely a spiritual authority. It became a territorial ruler. The Pope governed cities, collected revenues, and commanded armies. This marked a fundamental shift in the nature of the papal office. The Church now stood alongside kings and emperors as a political actor. The coronation of Charlemagne as emperor in 800 further elevated papal authority. By crowning an emperor, the Pope positioned himself as the ultimate source of legitimacy. The message was clear: imperial power required papal approval. Although this relationship was complex and often contested, it established a precedent that would shape medieval politics for centuries. As the Holy Roman Empire developed, tensions between emperors and popes intensified. Both claimed authority over Christendom, but their visions of power differed. Emperors viewed themselves as divinely appointed rulers with responsibility for both secular and religious order. Popes argued that spiritual authority surpassed all earthly power and that kings were subject to the Church. These competing claims reached their peak during the 11th century reform movement within the Church. Known as the Gregorian Reforms, this movement sought to purify the clergy, eliminate corruption, and assert papal independence from secular influence. At its core was the belief that the Church must be free from political control in order to fulfill its divine mission. Central to the conflict was the issue of investiture, the practice by which secular rulers appointed bishops and abbots. Reformers argued that only the Church had the right to grant spiritual authority. Secular rulers, however, depended on Church officials as administrators and allies. The struggle over investiture was not merely theological. It was a battle for control over land, loyalty, and power. Pope Gregory VII emerged as the most forceful advocate of papal supremacy. He declared that the Pope had the authority to depose emperors and release subjects from obedience to unjust rulers. These claims represented a radical redefinition of papal power. For the first time, the Pope openly asserted superiority over kings. The confrontation between Gregory VII and Emperor Henry IV symbolized this new reality. When Henry refused to abandon his right to appoint bishops, Gregory excommunicated him. Excommunication was a devastating weapon. It undermined Henry's legitimacy and encouraged rebellion among his nobles. Facing political collapse, Henry sought reconciliation at Canossa, dramatically illustrating the Pope's power over a crowned ruler. Although the immediate conflict ended in compromise, the broader struggle continued. Over the following centuries, the papacy refined its legal and administrative structures. Canon law developed into a sophisticated system governing church life and influencing secular legal traditions. Papal courts became centers of authority, and appeals from across Europe flowed to Rome. The papacy also expanded its influence through diplomacy and ideology. Popes acted as mediators between rival kingdoms, sanctioned wars, and defined moral boundaries for rulers. The concept of Christendom emerged, envisioning Europe as a unified Christian community under papal guidance. One of the most powerful expressions of papal authority was the call for crusade. In 1095, Pope Urban II urged Christians to take up arms to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control. The response was overwhelming. The Crusades demonstrated the Pope's ability to mobilize armies across borders and redirect violence toward religious goals. Although the Crusades had complex motivations and consequences, they significantly enhanced the papacy's prestige and reach. At the height of its power in the 13th century, the papacy functioned as a supranational authority. Popes such as Innocent III intervened in royal successions, launched crusades against Christian rulers, and claimed jurisdiction over moral and political matters throughout Europe. Innocent III described the papal office as standing between God and humanity, reflecting an unprecedented level of confidence and ambition. Yet the papacy's rise also provoked resistance. Kings resented interference in their affairs, and conflicts over taxation, appointments, and legal authority intensified. The very success of the papacy created new vulnerabilities, exposing it to political manipulation and internal corruption. By the late Middle Ages, the papacy faced mounting challenges. Prolonged conflicts with monarchs weakened its moral authority. The relocation of the papal court to Avignon in the 14th century, followed by the Western Schism, in which multiple popes claimed legitimacy, shattered the image of a unified church. Despite these crises, the institutional foundations built during the Middle Ages endured. The papacy had permanently altered the balance of power in Europe. It demonstrated that authority could be based not only on force, but on ideology, law, and moral legitimacy. The rise of the papacy was not simply the story of religious leadership. It was the emergence of one of history's most influential political institutions. By mastering symbols, alliances, and belief, the Church transformed spiritual authority into worldly power, shaping the destiny of Europe for centuries. This episode reveals how faith and politics became inseparable in medieval society, and how the struggle between crown and altar defined the course of Western civilization. The legacy of the medieval papacy continues to influence modern ideas of authority, governance, and the relationship between religion and state.